For 6 years, I worked a job that paid me exactly enough to survive, and I told myself a story about why. The economy was tight. My manager played favorites. The company underpaid everyone in my position. I had 100 reasons, and every single one of them pointed away from me. Then a man I met at a trade conference asked me one question that ended that story for good. He said, "If your income stayed exactly where it is for the next 10 years, whose fault would that be?" I started to answer with the usual list, and he stopped me. "I didn't ask what's happening around you," he said. "I asked whose fault." That single question is where the second half of my life began, and it is where I want to start with you today. Here is the first idea, and I want you to sit with it before we go any further. Your results are a reflection of who you are, not a reflection of what you're owed. Most people spend their entire lives trying to negotiate better circumstances instead of becoming a better version of themselves. They ask for a raise instead of asking what skill would make the raise obvious. They look for a lucky break instead of becoming the kind of person luck tends to find. I'm not telling you circumstances don't matter. They do. But circumstances are the wind, and you are the sail. The wind blows the same direction on everyone. What determines the voyage is how the sail is set. So let's talk about setting the sail, because that's really what personal development is. Not motivation, not hype, not a temporary rush of enthusiasm that fades by Thursday. Real personal development is the slow, deliberate construction of a person capable of handling more responsibility, more pressure, and more opportunity than they can handle today. And here's the promise I want to make you, the same promise that was made to me. If you change, everything around you starts to change with you, not because the world becomes kinder, because you become more capable of meeting it. I want to be honest with you about something because I think most personal development content skips it. Change is not comfortable, and it's not supposed to feel good on the way in. When I stopped blaming my circumstances, the first thing I felt wasn't relief. It was something closer to grief. For 6 years, I had a very convenient explanation for every disappointment in my life, and giving that explanation up meant admitting that the disappointment had been available to fix the entire time. And I simply hadn't done it. That's a hard thing to sit with. If you're watching this and you feel a little defensive right now, a little bit of resistance to what I'm saying, I want you to know that's completely normal. That resistance isn't a sign you're wrong. It's usually a sign you're close to something true. Now, I want to give you a way of thinking about this that changed how I plan my entire year, and I've taught it to every team I've ever led. Think of your life in 4 recurring conditions. 4 climates you'll pass through again and again, whether you like it or not. I call them storm, ground, growth, and yield. You don't get to skip any of them. You don't get to negotiate them away. But you absolutely get to decide who you become inside each one. Let's start with storm, because that's the one everyone wants to avoid and nobody manages to. Storm is the season of loss, setback, rejection, illness, financial pressure, the phone call you didn't want to get. It arrives on its own schedule, not yours. I've watched brilliant, capable people get flattened by the arrival of a storm simply because they believed, somewhere deep down, that if they did everything right, storms wouldn't come for them. That belief is the single most expensive belief a person can carry, because when the storm inevitably comes, it doesn't just cost them the storm. It costs them their confidence, their footing, sometimes their whole sense of who they are. Here's what I want you to know instead. Storms are not evidence that you did something wrong. Storms are simply part of the terrain. The question was never going to be whether you face one. The question is always what you become while you're in it. I know a woman who lost her business in a single bad year, 200 employees down to 0 in about 4 months. She told me later that the worst thing about it wasn't the money. It was watching herself almost become someone she didn't recognize, bitter, closed off, quick to blame. She caught it. She made a decision that the storm could take the business, but it wasn't allowed to take her character. 18 months later, she rebuilt, smaller and sharper, and she told me the version of her that came out the other side was more useful to her than the version that went in. That's the entire assignment during storm season. Come out sharper than you went in. Get wiser, Get sturdier. Get more useful to the people who depend on you. You cannot control when the storm shows up. You can absolutely control who's standing there when it clears. There's a practical side to this too, not just an attitude. During a storm, most people's decision-making gets worse at the exact moment it needs to get sharper, because fear compresses your thinking down to the next 48 hours. You stop planning and start reacting. So I've adopted a rule for myself. During any real storm, I'm not allowed to make a permanent decision based on a temporary feeling. Quitting the business, ending the relationship, walking away from the goal, all of that gets tabled until the weather clears enough for me to see past the next few days. Some of the worst decisions I've ever watched people make weren't wrong because the person lacked intelligence. They were wrong because the person made a 10-year decision using a 10-day mindset. Ride out the immediate weather first. Decide later with a clearer sky. One more thing about storm season before we move on, because I think it's the most overlooked part. You are not the only one going through it. Somewhere near you right now, someone else is standing in their own storm, and most people get so focused on their own survival that they stop noticing anyone else's. I've found that reaching out to help someone else during my own hard season does something strange to the size of my problems. It doesn't make them disappear, but it puts them in proportion. It reminds you that you still have something to offer, even when you feel like you have nothing left. Don't wait for your storm to fully pass before you show up for somebody else's. Sometimes that's exactly how you get through your own. Now let's talk about ground. The season right after the storm, when the sky is calm but nothing has grown yet. This is the most dangerous season of the four because it looks like nothing is happening. And most people mistake stillness for permission to coast. Ground is actually the season of preparation, and what you do here quietly determines everything that follows. This is when you're clearing the debris the storm left behind, rebuilding your habits, repairing relationships that got strained, getting your finances back in order. Nobody applauds you for this work because nobody sees it. But I promise you, the people who go on to build something remarkable are, almost without exception, the people who did unglamorous, unseen preparation during their ground season instead of waiting around for motivation to show up on its own. There's a small discipline I picked up during my own ground seasons that I still use today. I ask myself one question at the start of every week. What am I doing right now that I would be embarrassed to explain to the person I want to become in 5 years? That question has cut more bad habits out of my life than any amount of willpower ever did. Because it's not about guilt, it's about direction. It points you at who you're building, not just what you're avoiding. I also want to give you a warning about ground season, because it's the season where good intentions quietly die. People come out of a storm with big resolutions. They're going to overhaul everything at once. The health, the finances, the relationships, the career, all in the same week. It rarely works, and when it fails, they conclude the wrong lesson. They think the problem was the them. The real problem was the plan. Ground season rewards narrow, boring consistency, not sweeping reinvention. Pick one or two things. Rebuild those completely before you add a third. I've watched more people burn out attempting total transformation in 30 days than I've watched succeed at it, and I've watched plenty of people quietly transform their entire life over 18 months by never trying to fix more than 2 things at a time. After ground comes growth, and this is the season most people are actually waiting for their entire lives without realizing it. This is when opportunity is genuinely available, when the door is open, when the timing lines up. Here's the catch. Nobody tells you about growth season. It does not wait for you to feel ready. It has a window, and the window closes whether or not you walked through it. I've seen talented people let an entire growth season pass them by because they were waiting to feel more confident, more prepared, more certain. Confidence in a growth season is not something you wait for. It's something you generate by moving. You make the call before you feel ready to make it. You put the offer on the table before you're sure it'll be accepted. You start the project before every detail is solved. The person who waits for certainty in a growth season usually watches someone less talented and more willing walk through the door first. I want to be precise about what seizing a growth season actually looks like day to day, because it's not about frantic hustle, it's about urgency without panic. There's a difference. Panic makes you scattered. Urgency makes you focused. During growth season, you protect your calendar the way you'd protect a bank vault. You say no to things that don't move the opportunity forward, even pleasant things, even things you'd normally say yes to. You measure your weeks not by how busy you were, but by how much closer you got to the thing that mattered. Growth season is short. History and experience both tell you that. Treat it like it's short, because it is. I think about a young engineer I mentored a few years back who got offered a chance to lead a project far above his official title, essentially a growth season handed to him early. His first instinct was to turn it down. He said he wasn't ready. He wanted another year of experience first. I asked him a question I now ask everyone in that position. Will you ever feel ready, or will you only ever feel ready in hindsight, after you've already done it? He took the project. It was messy. He made mistakes, and he'll tell you today it was the single fastest year of growth in his career. Growth season doesn't hand you readiness in advance. It hands you the opportunity, and readiness gets built on the way through. Waiting for the feeling first has quietly ended more good opportunities than any actual lack of skill ever has. Then comes yield, the season of harvest. And this is where I want to give you the idea that changed my relationship with success more than any other. Whatever you harvest in the yield season, credit or blame, belongs entirely to you, not to the market, not to your competitors, not to the people who didn't help you enough. I made a decision years ago that I would never again explain a disappointing result by pointing outward. Not because outside factors don't exist, they do, but because the moment I start explaining my results by pointing at everyone else, I quietly hand away my own power to change the outcome next time. Full ownership isn't about blame. It's about keeping the steering wheel in your own hands. There's a trap inside yield season too, and it catches people who did everything right. It's the trap of comparison. You bring in a harvest you worked hard for, and instead of appreciating it, you spend the whole season measuring it against someone else's. I've learned to ask a different question during yield season. Is this more than I brought in last cycle? Am I more capable than I was going into it? That comparison, the one against your own past self, is the only comparison that actually improves you. The other kind just steals your peace. There's a second piece of yield season people miss, and it's this. Not every harvest is meant to be spent right away. Part of taking full ownership of your results is deciding what to reinvest and what to protect. I've seen people bring in a genuinely strong season and burn through all of it within weeks, financially, emotionally, in every sense, because they treated the harvest like the finish line instead of the fuel for the next cycle. A good harvest is not permission to stop building. It's raw material for the next storm you'll eventually face, the next ground you'll need to stand on, and the next growth window you'll want to be ready for. Take a portion of every harvest and put it to work on becoming the next version of yourself, before you spend a portion celebrating the current one. Now, here's something important. These 4 seasons don't run once and finish. They cycle. You'll pass through storm, ground, growth, and yield more than once in your life, sometimes more than once in a single year. The goal was never to escape the cycle. Nobody escapes it. The goal is to get better at moving through it every single time it comes around, so that your 10th cycle finds a far more capable person than your first one did. There's one more thing worth saying about the cycle before I move to the second idea, and it's about compounding. The first time you move through storm, ground, growth, and yield, the difference between doing it well and doing it poorly might look small on paper. A slightly better habit here, a slightly faster decision there. But these 4 seasons don't run once. They run over and over, year after year, and small differences repeated across many cycles stop being small. A person who gets 1% better at handling each season, every single cycle, ends up in a completely different place after 10 or 15 rounds than a person who handles each cycle the exact same way every time. This is the part that's easy to miss because it doesn't show up immediately. It shows up on a 10-year timeline, not a 10-day one, which means the real cost of staying exactly the same isn't visible today. It's visible only when you compare where you are to where you could have been, and by then a lot of time has already passed. Start the compounding now while the cost of waiting is still small. Let me give you the second major idea I want to leave you with today, because it ties all 4 seasons together. Most people chase success directly, and it almost never works, because success behaves less like a destination and more like a magnet. It's attracted, not captured. What that means practically is this. Instead of asking, how do I get more? The better question, the question that actually changes your trajectory is, who do I need to become for more to naturally come my way? I've watched people chase raises for a decade without asking what skill would make the raise inevitable. I've watched people chase relationships without asking what kind of person would naturally attract the relationship they want. Chase the person you need to become, and let the results follow that person around, because they will. This shows up in a very concrete way in how you show up for other people too. If you want committed people around you, you have to become someone worth being committed to. If you want disciplined people on your team, discipline has to be visibly running through you first, not just demanded from everyone else. People don't rise to your expectations. They rise or fall to your example. That's not a soft, feel-good idea. It's one of the most practical leadership principles there is, and I've never seen it fail in either direction. Before I leave you with the last thought, I want to ask you to do one small thing. Right now, without overthinking it, name the season you're actually in. Not the season you wish you were in, the real one. If you're in storm, your job this week is simply to protect your character, nothing more. If you're in ground, your job is one boring habit, done daily with no audience. If you're in growth, your job is to move before you feel ready. And if you're in yield, your job is to take full ownership of what you've built and reinvest a piece of it into who you're becoming next. Say it to yourself. Naming the season honestly is the first step every single time. I want to close with the same question that was put to me all those years ago, because I think it deserves to be put to you directly. If nothing outside of you changed, not the economy, not your circumstances, not the people around you, if everything simply stayed exactly as it is right now, and the only variable that moved was you, would that be enough to change your next 10 years? If your honest answer is yes, then you already know where the actual work is. It was never really about the storm outside. It's about who's standing inside it. Go build that person, one season at a time, and let everything else follow. And if this gave you something to think about today, stay with this channel, because we're going to keep building this out, one principle at a time, together.